You know what really grinds my gears? Wasted potential. Hey everyone, Afrodo Reviews here, helping you decide, is that worth reading over second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? So let's decide. Welcome back everyone, and today we're getting to the first book of my LGBT month review. We're starting with Gearbreakers. Gearbreakers is a sapphic YA dystopia novel written by Zoe Hana Mikuta and published on June 29th of 2021. It's the debut novel for Mikuta, who has gone on to publish a sequel to the book known as Godslayers, as well as a third book that is supposedly coming out in 2024 known as Off With Their Heads. That hasn't been published yet, obviously, but somehow still has 1 rating on Goodreads. Anyways, there isn't much else to say at the moment about this book due to its relative young age and the fact that it wasn't like a huge popular phenomenon. It was apparently a junior library guild selection. That's about all I can offer. Let's move on. Here are your ratings. And now we move on to the cover. Now, the cover of this is pretty good. It's a art section where the two main characters, Sona Steelcrest and Eris, I still haven't learned to say her name, are standing in front of a gigantic wind-up, as they're called. I'll just call them Mecha from now on, because I'm not going to lie, wind-up is kind of a dumb name, in my opinion. Obviously, no hate if you liked it or not. But it's a good cover. It gives us visual representations for the characters. It also shows us the sheer scale of the mechas in this universe, where both Sona and Eris, despite being pretty far back, are no bigger than this mecha's head. And you got a nice blend of colors, with it mostly blue, but the menacing red from the mechas lighting them up from the front. If I had one complaint about this, it was actually something that I had the mistake of when I was going in, but the two characters, I feel like their poses should be switched. Now, throughout the book, and even in the beginning, the character Eris is described as brash, young, and kind of, wild a little bit. Whereas Sona throughout the book is cold, more withdrawn, more pulled back. She's deadpan, snarky, that kind of thing. So when I looked at this cover, I was actually imagining this was Sona, and this was Eris, because of the way they're positioned. Eris here is sitting down, kneeling as if she's contemplating something while carefully examining her gloves. Careful precautionary measures before you go against the enemy. Whereas Sona has the more brash-looking pose, where she's already standing up, hip cocked confidently, her sword drawn, and kind of staring at you like, what's taking so long? Let's get going. It's just one of those, if it wasn't for the red eye, which is very significant as Sona's identity, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that this was Eris and this was Sona. That's my main complaint about this book. The back is fine. It has this little stylized thing here, which I do like, but apart from a small excerpt from the book, there's nothing else to talk about. As with all dust covers, the synopsis is on the inside. And I do kind of like this about the author section, where instead of the normal like this, you have to turn it over like this, and it feels more like it gives you a fair amount about her, the main character. That's not the main character, the author. So yeah, with that being said, there's not much else to say about the cover, so I'll go ahead and move on to the synopsis. Now, the synopsis for this book, I already read it out loud on my TBR. However, for the context of this review, even though I would highly recommend going to check out my TBR, not only to get the synopsis from the book as it's presenting itself, but also to give me views. Also to figure out what's going on next, but, views is also pretty important. Also, hey, I've been wondering something. I was told there's a bug with the subscribe button on YouTube. Did you guys hear about this? I just do a quick check for me. Make sure it's still working. Go down there and click that. And you know what? I've heard the same thing about the like button. So, click that too while you're at it. But anyways, for the context of this review, the basic synopsis of Gearbreakers is this tyrannical nation known as Gadolia has taken over this country. I'm pretty sure it's just a country. it's not really clear on how big of a land we're talking here, if it's a continent or it's a country. Like, Godolia itself is a city-state, basically, controlling territory, but one of the drawbacks of their wind-ups is they can't cross the oceans. But anyways, this follows the efforts of two characters, one known as Bellasona Steelcrest, and the other as Eris, that name, and as they attempt to bring down the country of Godolia. Now, the two of them are going about it in different ways. Eris is a direct rebel. She is someone who is directly opposing the current government by becoming what is known as a Gearbreaker. A person who sneaks into the mechas and destroys them from the inside out, putting things just out of place so the whole thing collapses around it. She's working with a small group in the Badlands, and they directly oppose it, but they aren't having much effort. They can destroy the mechas, but unfortunately, Godolia has an iron grip on the world. And Sona, who Bellasona prefers to go by Sona, so from here on I'll call her Sona. Sona, who went about it in a different way, joining the pilot programs, working her way up to becoming an elite pilot who pilots one of their best mechs known as the Valkyries, and basically is determined that she's going to take the entire system down from the inside out. Now, this pretty much details their experiences doing it, but it sort of changes when the two of them collide after Eris is basically captured and held in prison by Godolia after a mission gone wrong. Now, anything past that is a spoiler review, and so I'll cut it off there. But so let me go on to the review section before I get too much into this. This book is good in a lot of places. I personally really like I personally quite like the main characters, which is when you come to a YA novel where the two main characters are in a relationship in a sci-fi dystopia. That rarely happens, in my experience. Most of the time, the side characters are more important. The side characters are more interesting to me. Like, even with City of Bones with Cassandra Clare, my favorite character was Magnus Bane, not Clary or Jace. But I will say that in this book, my favorite characters were Eris and Sona. And that was pretty interesting, because I felt them well-rounded enough that they were interesting. Sona has a deadpan snark to her that actually had me chuckle in a few places, whereas Eris is consistently brash and, you know, I don't want to say hot-headed, but kind of that impulsive kind of thing throughout, which really does help their characters. And because of that, the romance does work, as the two of them definitely have a decent amount of chemistry. The story also doesn't force it to advance faster than it needs to be. I won't promise that the romance doesn't technically completely connect by the end of this book, but there are very strong hintings there that they're going to. So it felt like a genuinely close relationship that doesn't feel forced like a lot of YA romances do. It does have something of a love triangle at first, but to give it credit, that love triangle isn't very pronounced. Eris starts in a relationship with a character named Milo, but it's pretty early on. It's pretty obvious early on that she doesn't take the relationship very seriously, and Milo is sort of a non-factor after Sona appears. So it's really not. It really doesn't interfere in such a way that it dampens the book at all. So I did like that. However, one of the downsides of this book is, one of the downsides that I kept coming back to is this book has a lot of wasted potential. Gearbreakers really runs the gambit of introducing very interesting dynamics and very interesting plot elements just to sort of feel like it gets bored with them and then snips them off in an unsatisfying way. Or in a way that was inconvenient to the relationship of the two main characters. There's a variety of examples I'm going to provide. I'm going to start with a least spoiler one, and then I'm going to go into a way more spoilery. But, so, ahead, I'm just going to label them as how much of a spoiler is before I talk about them, but I need to give these three examples to give a good idea of what I mean. The first one is the relationship dynamics in Sona's background, and really Sona's entire unique plotline herself. When Sona's first introduced, we're given a sort of foil to the Gearbreaker unit that we deal with Eris, in that all of Sona's fellow pilots get their own personalities and their own dynamics with Sona herself, all while Sona is secretly plotting to take them all down. They seem a bit full of themselves, but are otherwise interesting people to learn about when the story feels like learning about them. The two most prevalent are Rose, who is a kind, nice person, despite the otherwise haughty and arrogant view that Sona has of most of the other pilots. And they do deserve that reputation. They do act like it. But Rose is one of those people that just seems nice, friendly, and otherwise helpful even when she has nothing to gain from it. A genuinely good person who's working for a tyrannical government, leading to a lot of questions of why she's doing this. There's also another character known as Victoria, who's cold, mean, and haughty to our main character, but it's hinted throughout that this is because she has complex feelings for Sona and is struggling with identifying her own feelings and trying to figure out what they are, which comes off as hostility towards our main character, eventually culminating with the reveal that she is attracted to our Sona and is just trying to figure out how to deal with it, with the implication that she might be getting better as she learns more and more about this. However, after her and Eris meet, Sona's whole plotline is just kind of balled up and thrown away. Out of just nowhere, Sona decides to throw out all of this work she used to get into the pilot program to take him down from the inside, solely to help Eris escape. She plans to just go rogue in general. She kills Rose in the escape plan, so that kind of kills that dynamic. And as much as Sona ruminates on it, the only reason we're left to feel sad about this, because we didn't really get to know Rose well enough, is we empathize with our character, but not really anything else. However, Victoria is also killed in the escape attempt, and it's an unsatisfying mecha fight between the two, which is another issue I'll get into later, but it's just an unsatisfying mecha fight that sort of ends with, I think, Victoria drowning after her mecha is defeated and she's basically thrown into a lake. And then after that, Sona's basically just part of Eris's plotline, and we don't really see anything unique from the fact that she infiltrated as a pilot program. In fact, the whole thing kind of felt like, again, Mikuta got bored with the idea of Sona infiltrating the pilot program to take everyone out, or didn't know how to work their relationship as happening with Sona still in the pilot program and Eris becoming a rebel. Personally, I would have done it where Sona becomes an inside man, passing along information to the rebels, and that requires constant contact with each other. But the second one, spoiler, mid. There's a twist later on during the escape attempt where Sona learns that she may have killed Eris' sister, another rebel, in a fight that happened in between when Eris was captured and before they escaped. Now, Sona didn't try to kill her sister, but due to the fact that she works for a tyrannical government who monitors the moves in battle, and she has other pilots with her, when she confronted her sister, she had to pick it up and basically toss it into some water. Now, Sona didn't try to kill them, but she acknowledges that a fall from that height, along with the fact that no one emerged from it afterwards, there's a strong suspicion that Eris' sister, Jennifer, I believe was her name, is probably dead, and Eris probably won't be happy when finding out about that. In fact, Eris does find out about that, but not through Sona. So you have this interesting dynamic where Eris is planning to kill Sona as they escape after they're free, and Sona wants to explain after they're free what happened. And you have this interesting idea, like, will Eris let her explain? Will they be able to overcome this hurdle? Did she really kill her sister, or is this a situation? Will Eris care? All that. However, this is quickly dropped. This whole dynamic is just snipped away once they're free, because the first Gearbreaker team they just happen to run into after they escape is the one with Eris' sister in it. Therefore, all tension in that regard is deflated. Gone. Boom. It's gone. The two don't even have a conversation about it. It's, she may have killed my sister. Oh no, I may have killed her sister. I need to kill her. I need to explain. Oh hey, she's still alive. Oh, cool. That's convenient. That's pretty much, that is the entire plotline. Number 3. Now this is the biggest spoiler of them all. I'm not gonna lie, you might guess it before it happens because it is such a cliche thing. Later on in the book, there is a moment where the government attacks the rebels' camp and almost destroys their plan. And Jennifer, Eris' sister, reveals that the only way they could have found their camp is if there were a mole inside the rebel camp. Now, admittedly, the Star Wars EU month kind of made me annoyed with the whole mole subplot in general, but this had its potential to be good. It had a potential to, okay, so how are they going to find the mole? Who is it? Where is it going to come from? How is it? No, it just tells you. Before the end of the book, you already know who the mole is. Despite the fact that the mole had maybe like 30, 40 pages at most to be a mole. And surprise, surprise, it's the guy who was leading them all along. It's just one of those, that is such a, at this point, it's a cliche. It was a novel idea when it was first done that the guy who created the rebellion was actually someone who's working for the government all along and was using this to keep the dissidents busy with non-effectual targets or to gather them all in one place to take them out. So apart from that, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Again, a lot of wasted potential, a lot of cool ideas, cool dynamics that are just kind of dropped because it feels like the author didn't know how to make them more interesting than they were. I mean, at this point, you should get a basic understanding of what I mean. Mikuta keeps introducing these interesting character dynamics, these interesting ideas, but then failing to capitalize on them. It feels like halfway into writing them, she decided that, oh, I don't really want to do this anymore. And either concluded it with absolutely no pizzazz or so fast that it might as well not have been in the book, or just kind of limply decided, and there you go. Honestly, I think my most disappointing one was one of the first ones I mentioned, was the fact that Sona gives up her entire unique plot line just to help Eris escape. I don't get that. I don't even get it from a character perspective, to be completely honest. Why would she spend years and years getting into this elite pilot program with the sole intention of toppling things from the inside just to give it all up to help a random prisoner of war escape? I don't get it. Could have been more interesting. Like I said, personally, I would have had... I've already given my opinion, but another issue I have in terms of wasted potential is that Mikuta doesn't really capture the power and scope I feel these 80-foot mechas would really have in reality. Now, the book makes a big deal about the power of these mecha, the book itself likening them to gods made material, but you don't feel it in the book. You really don't. You can talk about, divinity made into metal all you want. When our main character stops an 80-foot tall mech's main cannon, which is pure fire, with a pair of gloves that she puts on that shoot ice, they stop feeling special. Never once did I actually feel like these things are so strong, so terrifying, that they would have been able to take over the world. It's one of those, they almost have no issue taking these things out. At one point, a mecha, admittedly one of the weakest ones, catches them all off guard in a junkyard with none of their equipment, not even the magic ice gloves. They're basically magic ice gloves. And basically just a single sword for Sona to have. Now you think, okay, this is going to be a big, dangerous fight. It's going to really tax us, show us they're clever. Not really doesn't. They take it out with almost no effort at all. It's very unsatisfying with the defeat of this thing. And it just, like I said, it just doesn't work. These mechas don't feel powerful. It doesn't matter how much the narrative tells us they're powerful. If we can't feel it, if we don't feel that dread that it comes with facing one, I don't see why they're so dangerous. Now, another issue I have, admittedly, this is more of a critique of YA tropes in general rather than specifically this book. But Godolia, the evil empire, it's a stupidly evil kind of empire. Basically, they're the kind of people that would grab a box of kittens, stuff them in a bag, and toss them in a river. And then asked why they did that, they would just shrug and say, I just felt like doing it.
You're not gonna shoot a puppy, are you, Jack? Yeah, in the face. Why?
They're just evil for the sake of evil. Why do they do what they do? Because that's the evil thing to do in this scenario. It doesn't make sense. Like, okay, the best way I can explain it is Godolia rules from a single city-state where all the power is located. However, in the surrounding territories is the Badlands, where they have a series of basically resource towns, which are each given a quota of a specific material that they must reach every day or every week Otherwise, a mecha will come in and completely wipe the town off the map. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. You don't get anything. You fail to meet that quota once, everyone's dead. Ignoring the huge amount of ways I can pick that apart as stupid, as just accepting it because it's a YA novel, one of the examples that is given to us in this book specifically is something that makes them just seem stupid. See, sometime in the past, a completely loyal town did meet their quota. In fact, I think they were a little over their quota. And they loaded up this train. However, this train is automatic, and a fault in its software caused it not to leave after it was loaded up. Now, the citizens of the town thought, logically, oh, okay, they'll notice that it was a fault in the train, and they'll just come fix it, and it's nothing to worry about. Despite the fact that the Empire knows it was a fault in the train, a mecha still shows up and wipes that town off the map. They completely lost a town that was not only producing resources at the capacity they wanted it to, but was completely full of loyal citizens because their train broke down. That doesn't send a message of do what we say or we'll kill you. That's you make one mistake, I'm gonna go in your house and shoot you for fun. It's so evil that it stretches the point of plausibility and no longer makes sense. Apart from that, really, everything else I have to say is about nitpicks. Mostly nitpicks. For example, the fight scenes are pretty hard to follow. The number of times when I was reading through them, I would get lost, have to blink, go back and read again to figure out what the heck just happened. And following off that, despite the fact that Sona is an elite pilot who joined the Valkyrie unit, you never get that feeling when she's actually in mecha-to-mecha combat because she gets whooped, and it's only through the intervention of an outside force or an ally that she is able to stop the mecha. And it's just one of those, it doesn't feel like she was an elite unit, even though the other people she fights are other elites. It just felt like ways to destroy these mechs she had, so she doesn't have them as a rebel. Now, the main reason that these are nitpicks is mostly because combat is not the focus of the story. It's more about the relationship and the rebellion itself rather than the combat of the rebellion. So I was able to ignore that a little better. But yeah, apart from that, nothing else much to say. I would probably rate this a 6 out of 10. Yeah, it wasn't the best in the world, but it did have some redeeming qualities, and it is important to note that not only is this a YA novel, but it's a debut YA novel of an author. So naturally, you have to consider that this author is still working out some of their kinks, still breaching into the world of writing. And, as I've said before, a debut novel will often be an author's worst work. I don't necessarily think it's bad, but I do think that there was a level of refinement that it skimped out on that made the book suffer quite a bit. And if it had that level of refinement, that level of focus, this book could have been much, much better. I don't think it was bad enough. I don't think it was good enough that I would really go out and recommend it to just anyone. But I do think it's good enough that I'll probably pick up Godslayers and see if it's improved. Apart from that, the real question is, does it deserve Mount Doom? And the answer is not really, no. As I said before, it's not terrible. It's not don't read this ever kind of bad. It's just a debut It's just a new author struggling with their writing in a genre that admittedly has quite a few issues to more advanced readers. I guess is a way of saying that without trying to sound too stuffy. Not to mention, I'm obviously no longer in the target audience, not being a young adult or sapphic in any way. So there's probably some stuff here that I don't appreciate as much as someone else would. And I would recommend, if anything I've said so far doesn't sound like a deal breaker, or this sounds interesting and you think I'm over-exaggerating the flaws, feel free to check it out, prove me wrong. If you enjoy it, that'd be great, but for me personally, it wasn't that good. It wasn't bad, but it would be a guilty pleasure of mine alone. It wouldn't be something that I would be like, this is so good, you need to read it. But now we move on. We've seen the true evilness of Godolia, their black souls painting the land red with the dark, twisted gray that consumes them. No, we need to see some better royals, some royals who are on the lighter side, who are different colors of morality. Maybe something along the lines of a red, white, and blue kind of royalty, you would say. But until then, remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones.